Welcome to another episode of Humans for Humanity. There are some voices that don't echo, they land, not because they're loud, but because they come from somewhere so aligned you feel yourself straighten just by listening. This is Humans for Humanity, not just a podcast, a spiritual intelligence project disguised as a conversation. Here we don't chase catharsis, we witness it. We don't extract people's pain for performance. We honor the medicine they made from it. And today we are joined by a woman who doesn't just speak the truth, she speaks from it. Sara is the founder of Guidance by Sara, a tarot reader, a Reiki practitioner, a space holder for people ready to stop looking outward for what they've always carried within. This is the reckoning of the quiet return. Sara didn't stumble into healing through chaos or collapse. She walked herself inward, woke up one day and realized no one was coming to hand her her truth. No one could, because it was hers to uncover. She teaches that healing isn't time-bound, but choice-bound. That pain doesn't dissolve just because years pass. You have to meet the energy and then let it leave. She doesn't play guru. She's not here to perform mysticism or wrap wounds in poetic distraction. She tells it like it is. You don't need a savior, you need a mirror. And sometimes that mirror is a single question, asked at the right time by someone who isn't afraid of your silence. That's Sara, the one who won't rescue you because she respects you too much to rob you of your own power. She's not for the crowd that needs drama to feel depth. She's for the ones who are finally ready to stop performing pain and start releasing it. This is not a rebranding. This is realignment. This is what it sounds like when a woman owns her knowing. Let's begin. Humans for Humanity is more than a podcast. It's a living experiment, a spiritual archive, a collective echo of what it means to walk the obstacle course of embodiment and come out more whole than we began. Each episode is guided by spirit and shaped by tarot. I don't write questions in advance. I pull cards and follow the energy. Because I believe the soul already knows what wants to be spoken. It just needs permission to speak. Behind this project is something bigger. I channeled a map called the Blueprint. It's my theory of consciousness. It says that we don't just show up on Earth. We drop in with purpose. And as we move through life, we traverse an invisible structure made of energetic gateways, each linked to a chakra, each initiating us into a deeper version of truth, power, and love. Every human story holds clues. When someone speaks about betrayal, grief, purpose, survival, or awakening, I listen for the frequency underneath of the facts. The Blueprint helps me track where their soul is in the arc of return, what chakra they're wrestling with, what lesson they came here to embody. This podcast helps me prove the Blueprint by living it in real time, by letting people tell the truth of what they've been through and noticing the patterns that emerge. Because when we zoom out, we see your story isn't separate from mine. And our pain isn't random, it's part of the passage. Humans for Humanity is the collective field where those pieces come together, where what once broke us becomes what makes us medicine. It's a sacred conversation between one voice and the many, one soul and the system that we're all moving through. And if we keep listening, we just might remember why we came. Welcome, Sara, and thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. This is so cool.
So the vibes here with the black roses on the screen, I think we're kind of going to go in this direction because that you have this very strong grounded connection. Like there are leaders who are very intellectual, there are leaders who are very emotional. It's like you found the bridge between them, right?
Okay. Thank you so much for your kind words.
Oh, you're so welcome. So there's this process of slowing down to recognize that the tools you once sought outside of you were actually within. Tell us about that process.
That is such a fun question to start with. I feel like in a weird way you've summarized like one of my biggest lessons actually. I remember when I first started getting into reading tarot, I was like very quick to buy like all of the crystals, the pendulums, all of that good stuff. I thought it was so cool. And then I worked with them and I had great experiences. The longer I did, I was like, oh, this energy was in me the whole time. And I don't discredit the energies that I've gotten externally, but I do feel like ultimately it just like led me back in, which is so cool. I feel like it's so hard to describe that to somebody that's never really experienced that. But in my journey, I always try to like encourage that because I feel like I don't know, I feel like it's been the biggest blessing in a way.
So in that regard, there's something that you resisted using, right? Like I recognize my pull towards this. I recognize I'm good at this, but there's some resistance there. Tell us about that.
It's fun to think about because I feel like this could go in multiple ways or multiple avenues. I feel like I was even resistant to Oracle at some points until recent years. I've been reading for close to 6 years now. In the past 2 years is really when I started reading Oracle. Pendulums too, I've had trouble with. I mentioned having those tools, but like I did recognize that to some degree, like they just were not like doing it for me, if you will. And my mentor only taught me how to read tarot. And I think for some reason, I only felt like I was like allowed to read it. You know, that was like the only thing I was permitted to. I feel like those two questions kind of like go hand in hand where I stopped looking externally for tools because maybe I thought that this wasn't for me, you know, so I got to find it my own way.
I feel like you're a lot like me in that regard where you wanted to make sure that you had proof like for yourself, but like also this foundation of like, okay, I know what I'm talking about, but I also have shown myself for sure that I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That comes with this responsibility, right? Because when you're on the mission of trying to build that, like, okay, like I've proven myself to some degree, it comes with this almost like I need to hold back until a certain point. Tell us about that point where you were like, okay, I trust myself now.
My goodness, you're so good with this. This is so cool. I don't want to get into my own background too much, but I would say that like I am very much surrounded by like skeptics or people that are like very unfamiliar with this stuff. And I've always had like the philosophy that like if I'm going to do something, I have to own it 100%, you know? And when I was starting to introduce this to like the people around me, I had to really make sure I like believed in it 100%. Not because I was expecting to get like hate or anything. It's just like I wanted to make sure I could present it with confidence so that nobody could shake me, you know what I mean? I had to find my own like rooting with it.
Give me one line per card here. When you were met with skepticism, what's one internal belief that held up against the skepticism? So like, because I believe this, I know that this skepticism is not my truth.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's because like it helps me no matter if it was like a spiritual tool, if it was, I think what people call like spicy psychology, like if it was just like in your head, whatever, I was like, it's helping me. It has to help someone else. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That was kind of my mindset with it too. It's like, okay, well, it can't really be evil if I'm seeing it help people. How evil could it be, right?
Oh, okay. This is funny because I think when I see the Wheel of Fortune, I think of like the ups and the downs. You know, you could be at the top of the wheel or the bottom. And if that's going to apply here, I think it's like, yes, it can work for everybody, but sometimes it might not work for every occasion. I think like I've even seen that in my own practice where it's like cards would have helped me before, but maybe not for this exact energy, right? Where it's like where I needed to go inward. No matter what answer I get, that's not going to be enough here to make it like a bad tool. It's just not for every occasion. Ooh. The Knight of Swords and I have like a very interesting relationship because I'm known to run my mouth at times. I think being the Knight of Swords reversed, I would say that that has shown me how to like be more reserved with my perspective. And it's like, I don't think I need to prove that it works for everybody now. I'm so much more rooted in my practice that I'm like, okay, these tools work. They work for me. They work for other people. And if somebody's going to have a problem with it, I'm just going to like let them be there with it. I'm not going to like try to prove prove them otherwise. So keeping to myself a little bit, I think is where that's coming in.
There is this balance of being in the position that we're in, being readers and kind of guiding people in that way. There's this position of sometimes you know the amount of truth that other people are ready to accept, right? So in that regard, how do you balance between, okay, I see something that they're not seeing, but I know they might not be ready to receive it. I don't want to overpower them. I want to guide or like give little truth nuggets of some sort. How do you find that balance?
This is so fun. I've actually faced this with a specific client that I've been very close with over the years, and she gave me the advice, say it anyways, which I was never willing to do. I was like, I don't want to push anybody too far. I think I had to grow into that a little bit. I never want to leave somebody feeling unprepared, but I would rather be honest with them. I like to think, and I don't deem myself as like all powerful, but like I like to think if they're coming to me to some degree, they are ready. And if it is going to stir something up emotionally in them, I think I would rather sit with them through that. I do feel like there's definitely a way to go about it though. I don't think that I need to deliver in the harshest way or the bluntest way possible. I feel like I would be able to tell how to go about it. There's always a better way to go about it. But to some degree, I think that like if you're seeking out the reading, then you're like ready to hear it. That's something I've not always felt. I feel like it's more of a recent development.
So in terms of that development of perspective, I feel like there's this layer being shed, because I've even seen like in your content, you becoming more and more comfortable with like just being, right? It's like this shadow has kind of dissipated and now confidence has taken the place. But this confidence of like the quiet confidence, right? The confidence that doesn't yell. What shadow would you say has kind of gotten out of the way that has allowed this?
First of all, thank you. That was very sweet. My first thought when you ask that, I think, is the fear of being wrong, honestly. I think like with this stuff, like there's a big association with like if you're wrong, you're like a scammer or, you know, something of that nature, you're a fraud. And eventually I've like grown to like acknowledge that like just because I try my best doesn't mean I'm always going to be 100% accurate. Doesn't mean I have bad intentions. And I think that's just trusting myself more, that like I'm coming from the Rex in a way.
And I agree with that so much. It's funny because people will jump right into, oh, you're a scammer, you're not real. Okay, so you're perfect at your job every day. You've never misinterpreted something. Like I'm talking to spirits in signals. What like
What do you want from it?
right? The wound of the silenced pulse.
Ooh.
Emotional truth buried in logic. This wound arises when feelings are dismissed, minimized, or intellectualized to stay in control. You learn to prioritize reason over emotion, clarity over vulnerability. It can leave you disconnected from your heart, uncertain how to express what you feel, and longing to be fully known beyond what you can explain.
It was strangely important.
In the black and white here, I feel like this is about to be literal, black and white. Like, what was the black and white thinking? Tell us about the process of finding comfort in being able to take steps forward without being able to see the next 10 steps. Like there was this shift of like, okay, I might not know what comes next, but I'm going in trust. Tell us about that process.
Ooh. It's kind of funny because I feel like this is relevant to today a bit. I was nervous before I, got on here, and I think like I had to reassure myself. Like I've done things before without knowing the outcome. Like I just have to trust that I guess agreed to do this with intention, right? I think a lot of times this is like sort of where our higher self comes in. I don't talk about the higher self very much, but I feel like sometimes my higher self like drags me by my hair to places that I'm very afraid to go. And I think whether you're a spiritual person or not, you can definitely land yourself in the same energies at times. I feel like I hear all the time, like people are like, I don't know why I did it, but something made me like turn around and go to the store. Like, dude, I feel like that's where that energy comes in.
I'm going to flip over one card at a time. Something that your higher self has directed you to do outside of your comfort zone.
Oh my God. Oh, that's so funny. I knew this was going to come up too, but in the funniest way. I was a tattoo apprentice when I was like 16. And at the time, it was like my absolute like dream job. Like I could not have asked for better circumstances. I was so excited. And then like later into the apprenticeship, I was a couple of months in and I just like was really struggling and it was a lot. Like I was 16, it was a big environment for me. And I ultimately decided to walk away because it was just so bad for my like nervous system. And to be honest with you, like I think still to this day, that was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make. And like I still question every now and again if I made the right decision. But I ended up going a very different route in life with the reading tarot and stuff. But it was decisions like that where I didn't even have like a full, I guess, reason at the time. It was just like it didn't feel right. Like nothing could get me to like stabilize in that moment.
You'll never be able to get peace in somewhere not meant for you.
Yeah. And I learned that I feel like I learned that the hard way because I even like stuck it out longer than I ideally should have, you know? That's so funny that came up. Oh my goodness. Not too long after, when I did walk away from like the tattoo apprenticeship is when I did start getting into this stuff. And that's when, you know, I feel like another path completely opened up that I never would have been able to foresee, ironically. I think that like, even when it feels like something is so meant for you and you get there and you realize this isn't it, you're still on like a path that's going to lead you to that beginning that you're ultimately searching for, because I think I've gotten the same fulfillment that I would have if I would have followed the tattoo route. Just it's a very different set of circumstances. I've been in a lot of different career environments, honestly. I can't tell if it's something to be admired or something to be embarrassed about, to be truthful with you. And I just say that lightly, but like I feel like I've experienced a lot of different flavors of careers, and I've noticed that like it leads me back to the same place every time. And I think that like those layers are kind of shed over time in a way. The Five of Wands makes me think of all of this chaos, like too many of the wrong energies being in your environment, and like the ones that are supposed to stay ultimately like are there.
So in that regard, coming back and finding more of yourself, there was a certain projection that you had to recognize was not your truth. Tell us about that.
When I was in that apprenticeship, I was told like at the time that like my relationship wouldn't last or like my life would change. Like I would have to like essentially sacrifice everything to get this. And you know, at the time, I feel like I look back and I see my mentor as just somebody that was like trying to get me prepared for like a tough run. And I don't really fault that person for that. But I realized that you can still have like a passion and you can still work on it and not have to sacrifice things. That was really heavy for me though at one point. Like I think at the time, whether I wanted to admit it or not, that kind of contributed to my decision making to walk away. But I'm glad now that I do acknowledge that like that wasn't the case and things are still thriving. So
the process of rebuilding from there. Okay, so you chose to walk away from what you thought was going to be your long-term future, right?
yeah.
You had to decide, okay, this is who I'm going to show up as now. And then you had to start showing up that way. Tell us about that process.
Wow. Okay. I will say going the spiritual route was not like, it wasn't a career pick. It was honestly like my own it was an interest that snowballed. It did get to a point where I like did decide to start making it part of my career and just ultimate like lifestyle. And there were so many times, like more than I can count, where I was like spiraling, texting my friends, calling them and being like, I can't do this, you know? And I feel like that energy goes hand in hand with what I was just talking about when I had to walk away from the apprenticeship. It was like this self-imposed gate that I was going to have to like let things go. I didn't realize I was even carrying that, you know, or like those fears that like things were going to have to change. I didn't realize how it got in my way multiple times.
It's bringing up a very important point that energy cannot be destroyed. It exists and we just transmute it into something else. So that energy, that lesson, what you carried from those projections was this belief that was going to continue going until you reprogrammed it.
Yeah.
Literally a reprogramming of a belief, right? This is the fear. This is the slowing down and recalibration of it. And this is the new belief that you had to put in its place. Tell us about the new belief you had to put in its place.
Okay, this is going to take a weird turn. I got into a lot of like Zen Buddhism practices in recent years, and I wouldn't say I'm like the perfect example of it, but I do feel like it allowed me to look at things with impermanence, but then an appreciation for it. I feel like I developed so much more gratitude for the way things are now, and even if they're gonna change in the future, it's like I don't have to brace for that, or I don't have to fault myself if things are going to change. I think that that's like also taking on more responsibility responsibility for things that are just like kind of naturally evolving through life. I feel like I was putting too much pressure on myself. It led me to some interesting places, but I think ultimately where I ended up was like with gratitude for just my current circumstances overall.
What would be one thing that would come up that you would have to then say, okay, no, I'm choosing to handle this thought differently now?
Two of Pentacles, I think, would be talking about my finances and maybe like a lack. Like if I spend money, like that's my last dollar. I think now, even if we're talking about permanence, is like I was thinking about permanence in like a very negative way, where it's actually like a benefit. Like the money that I spend, it's not the end of it. It'll come back. Things will always come back. Things will always, take another shape. You were talking about like things not being destroyed. That energy is always there. Evolution more than anything. Six of Swords, I would take as like domestic transitions, daily lifestyle changes, things like that. So I would say that like accepting that I don't have to be on a very, very tight-knit routine to not like evolve once again. I was very rigid about this for the longest time. I like felt like if I'm not, taking my vitamins or going to the gym at a specific time every day doing the same exact routine, then it's not going to work. And I come to learn that like that actually burnt me out more than anything. It's like being able to let myself breathe and change things was like the best thing for me.
I agree with that. I used to have that as well, especially with like the gym and stuff. Like, okay, if you don't do it perfect, it's not going to work. There's no point in doing it if you're not going to do it perfect.
Oh, it's awful. It's such a limiting mindset.
It's exhausting.
Oh, okay. I take this card as like, I always say busy business, like with people being in and out. I'm fortunate that I've had a lot of good examples of what small businesses look like in my area. And I feel like I compare myself to that a lot. And I think if I'm not getting like consistent engagement, be it like online, in person, whatever, consistent reactions, I feel like I start to think like I'm failing 100% rather than like the, what goes up must come down, the ups and the downs, if you will. That didn't come out right, but
I feel like that's a big part of like how you lay the foundation for your readings is getting people to understand just because there's downs doesn't mean that everything is going to hell in a handbasket. It just means that's the ebb and flow. Talk to the viewer about the mindset around sitting with what scares you actually is what sets you free, because then you don't have to keep running from it.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like really, there's a specific client that comes to mind where I feel like I really worked through this with them. And I think it was like, if I recall, it was like in regards to a breakup. They were terrified of a breakup. And I was like, you have to believe that you're going to be okay no matter the circumstances, and that you're, at the end of the day, just meant to experience this. There's always something to learn. There's always something to be grateful for with the circumstance. Now, granted, some circumstances are not ideal, and I do feel a little bit insensitive saying that at times, but I feel like as long as you are accepting there's a lesson within every moment, then there's something to be like grateful about it. I definitely struggled with this a lot. I had severe anxiety my entire life, and like I wouldn't say it's gone away entirely, but that mindset alone has helped me.
What would you say is the shadow that you had to run from the longest?
I'm laughing because I feel like it's so silly. I do feel like I avoided acknowledging my own like jealousy at times for the longest time. I remember being in like junior high and high school and being like, being jealous is so dumb, like just get over it. And I didn't realize that that's still very much like within me. It was almost like I permanently, or I like entered the world thinking that that was not a possible emotion for me to feel. Little did I know I had like so much of it that I was just not acknowledging. And it was in the simplest ways too. It was just like, I think it was like sneakily comparing myself to other people and not recognizing it. It was more within the subconscious. And I didn't realize that until I started doing like more of like the heart chakra work, and how much that was like getting in my way, or ultimately like blocking my feelings of gratitude.
When you're not looking at it, you're like, oh, it's presenting as jealousy. But when you actually sit and look at it and face it, you're like, oh no, it's just something that I want to awaken in myself that I'm seeing in someone else. And it's because I'm not sitting with it, it's translating as jealousy. I feel like the word jealousy reads as like a lower vibrational emotion, right? And I feel like that's why you wouldn't align with it. But when you look at it as, okay, it's really not that. It's just something in me that I'm recognizing and I'm longing for.
Yeah.
That's the shift that I feel like a lot of people, when they recognize it in that way, they can look at it a little bit deeper, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's like almost empowering that in that way because you're just recognizing like it's human to want those things.
The wound of the invisible cry, suffering unseen, unheard, unheld. This wound forms when your pain goes unnoticed, whether because you hid it, were taught to minimize it, or were surrounded by those who couldn't hold it. You learn to cry in silence to cope alone. Can leave you feeling abandoned in your darkest moments and unsure if your needs are worth naming. When you recognized that this emotion was there, what did you realize was a change that you were resisting within yourself?
I think that that card goes really well with what I said. Honestly, I'll explain. Like, I think more than anything, I was jealous of people that have like really good friends or, you know, they could be open with people. And I didn't realize that, like, once again, that was like a self imposed thing. I've always been very independent. I always had great people around me. It's like not a reflection of who they are. I've always avoided being open about my feelings. And I think I had a jealousy for people that, like, I don't want to say it this way because I feel like it sounds negative, but like they get the attention that they were looking for when they need it, you know, and I was getting in my own way of, I suppose, receiving it when I ideally would want it.
How did you learn to trust yourself to be in receiving mode?
Honestly, I feel like that is something that's fairly new to me. I don't know that I have the most ideal example of this, but I would say in the recent years, I did get closer to a friend of mine, and I feel like that was just really healing. Unfortunately, she was dealing with her own heavier issues. And I don't know if it was because she was dealing with things that I felt like, you know, it was more of an open space. I think to investigate that further, I would say that like where the comparison comes in is the people around me. I feel like, you know, they've also been very independent with how they handled their struggles. So I felt like I couldn't be open with mine. So in a weird way, like I was healing by like helping somebody else that was emotionally going through it. I think I worried that that comes off like, I guess, selfish, that I was trying to like take on using their emotional energy to heal my own, but I do feel like it was like very much balanced as well. Like we held space for each other.
That makes me think of one of my favorite sayings or quotes. It's like sometimes when you aren't sure how to heal something in yourself, you find someone else and you heal them first. And you're not doing it for selfish reasons. You're doing it to learn what would help heal it. Tell us about the choice to end a certain cycle that allowed you to take back your power.
It's funny, I'm going to go back to career now. I think that there was a place that I used to love working at, but I noticed that like there was some boundaries being pushed consistently. And it was interesting because like normally I could just brush it off because I loved working there. But eventually I was recognizing that that was wearing me down in a lot of strange ways. I was going to work 7 hours and I would just come back like literally exhausted. Like it was something in me. I couldn't identify it at the time, but now I recognize that it was like my boundaries being pushed, and I just ended up walking away. I got like sick of it one day. Still to this day, I feel like I could have handled it better, but I recognized that that's where, you know, my power was being taken from me, and I think I handled it one way or another, just desperately trying to get it back, I guess, at the time.
1 or 2 lines per card. In regard to the statement, boundaries are where I can love me and you at the same time.
I think of like emotional upheaval in this situation. I can be struggling and you can be struggling, but that doesn't take away from either of our feelings.
It's not a competition.
Yeah, it's a competition.
That's important.
I don't know if this is going to be exactly the prompt you gave me, so I apologize.
Whichever way you want to take it.
Okay. I think of how like everybody's idea of like success is different. What you want out of life is very different than someone else. And yeah, that could be challenging.
You can let people talk you out of your dreams if you don't hold that type of boundary.
Yeah, exactly. I think of his like crystal ball in this picture and how like you can see it going one way and somebody else can see it going very differently. And I think even just that expectation alone can talk about like how it's going to go. It's your perception of it. Like if you're getting ready to assume the worst, like you will experience it in a much more heavier format than someone else with a positive mindset. I think that's talking about perspective, I guess.
So speaking on mindset, there's a version of you from the past that you incorporate now so that you can help others, right? It's like a version of you that you had to re-accept. Talk about that version.
My mom is a very she's very professional, and I feel like I was a very casual person when I first started reading, and I recognize now that like a little bit of professionalism can sometimes help a situation, like staying calm, cool, and collected and not feeling 110% of somebody's reading. That was a big thing for me. I was constantly getting like wrapped up in other people's emotions because I do care a whole lot, and I feel like I observed her like detachment in some ways and used it to ultimately support my clients.
That's another way to do that boundary too, because you can't pour from an empty cup. And if you're draining your cup every reading, can't do that many more. Talk about the integration of a very important lesson as it pertains to shift of perspective.
Okay, I don't know how to say this nicely. I think I used to hold very tight to certain perspectives, and this could be, I guess this is related to tarot, but it could be like a lot of things. I used to hold very tight, and I just feel like I've kind of sinned on a lot of things, and I recognize that like the longer you hold something, the more it's hurting yourself. I guess it's okay to have beliefs that you'll die on those hills, right? But I think ultimately like staying receptive is not the problem, and that's something that I kind of had to like actively reinform myself of, I guess. Staying teachable, I think, is the lesson here in this situation.
That feels to be a big problem with why people stay in their ego or in fear, because it's this shadow that they don't want to address. How would you describe how that shadow appears? Like, how does it look like on others?
I think that that's like a certain level of, I always want to say obsessiveness. They are obsessed with their own idea. I mean, I think when you come to your own ideas, they become very important to you. They become part of your identity. I do think to some degree that shows like fear that you are not valuable if you don't have very interesting perspectives to offer or like very strong opinions. I think in some ways, a lot of people are afraid to kind of be neutral because that just means that they don't care, and that, you know, that's like less desirable in some ways. Or rather, I should say that like not having a strong opinion means that you don't care. They don't want to be mistaken as somebody that is not caring.
The wound of the soul widow, grieving unlived versions of yourself. This wound arises when paths you once longed for fade away, dreams unchosen, identities outgrown, or parts of you silenced to survive. You carry quiet grief for the lives you didn't get to live. It can leave you feeling hollow, nostalgic, or unsure how to honor what was lost while still moving forward. Do you feel like sometimes people aren't able to loosen their grip on something because they feel like the control is lost, even though the grip isn't really control? It's the illusion of control.
I agree with that, honestly. I feel like they need something to hold on to, honestly. So that it's like a candle, almost like to hold their own light, right? If they don't have that candle in front of them, then they don't know where they're going.
What advice would you give the listener about making decisions that feel right to the soul and not feeling like they need to come up with all of these defenses for them? Like, your truth doesn't need to defend itself.
I think with that, when you have that level of integrity within your decision making, it's that like you don't have to explain yourself as much, because I think people just see it within you. Like they see you as a more settled individual, right? I think unfortunately at times, if you are picking a path that you know is not ideal, people can see that, you know, they can feel that you're uncomfortable within your own skin. And I think the more comfortable you are presenting, like the less that you are to be like questioned. I think even if you are questioned, like that stability is to some degree like unshakable.
So you're kind of touching on the inside needs to match the outside. What you are aligned with on the inside needs to match with what you're focused on externally, or everything is going to be off, right? Talk about the process of, a lot of times when people don't know where they're going, they have this urgency that makes them rush and then they miss the exit. Talk about how to talk about that. Talk in whatever way you want to take that.
This one I feel like is so special to me. I feel like this was a big lesson I learned actually when I first started reading tarot. I'm a very impulsive person by nature, and talk about lesson integration. I had to really learn that like if I have to do it on an impulse, then I shouldn't be really doing it at all. Like there's always time to do something. And I've had like creative projects even where I feel like I need to get them done immediately, or else someone's gonna snatch up my idea And the reality is like, if I want to do it and I ultimately put my energy into it, like that project isn't going to go anywhere. Like that energy that's meant for me is not going anywhere. This is something I really had to practice what I preached. Still to this day get tripped up about that though. That sense of impermanence, I guess we're going back to what I was talking about originally.
I completely agree with that. That's actually kind of the blueprint and the Humans for Humanity podcast. In the beginning, it was like rush, rush, rush. I got to get this out. And it was a whole additional year before I actually started it because it just wasn't time. What would you say to the statement of what is meant for you will not miss you?
I mean, first of all, I feel like that's given me a lot of peace at one point. It's not always easy though to feel that way. I think a lot of people can be in denial of that when their circumstances are not ideal. You know, I think of like the people that really want like the dream relationship or the dream career or something, like, you know, they're going to college in like a quote, like dying industry or something. Like, I feel like I've had to convince a lot of people that like, if that's what you really feel drawn to, like that it's for a reason. And, you know, let's say the path does divert a little bit, you're still going in the direction you're meant to be in. I was actually told by one of my managers years ago that like the right path for you will always like choose you to some degree. Like you know, you can seek it out, but it's like you're going to land where you're supposed to land anyways.
So 1 or 2 lines per card to the statement of you're right where you need to be to get to where you want to go.
I mean, I think of like the scales in this situation that like if you're gonna run headfirst unbalanced, you're probably gonna fall. But if you're gonna walk, you know, nice and steady, you're gonna get there right on time.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like I think of a situation where you're forcing something that's like uncomfortable, you know, keeping yourself in circumstances that you're not supposed to be in. That being said, I don't think you can ever fully do wrong by trying again and again or trying for something that you really want. But I think there's almost like a karmic aspect of that like it's going to be empty if you're going to force something that's not meant for you. I think that sometimes we get frustrated with ourselves because we spend too much time having anxiety about certain things or, you know, losing sleep over it, like how the card depicts, right? I think that those anxious moments, honestly, like they teach us a lot about ourselves, whether we get to know our physical body, our thought process, our shadows. That shouldn't be, I guess, time that you regret because you can ultimately learn from it more than anything. You shouldn't just shove it down, I guess, is what I'm saying, right?
What's one thing that anxiety taught you?
I feel like I'm very lucky in this sense, but I feel like it's never as bad as I imagine it's going to be. And actually, to go a little bit deeper into that, like I recognize that like that is my body's way of like scanning for threats and to have appreciation for my body trying to protect myself, I guess. That was something that like, it was almost hard to admit to myself. I just thought that like I would override it and be like, my brain's being dumb. Like I can't do this, right? And I think I just kind of acknowledging it that way actually just kind of helped me to appreciate when a thought crosses my mind.
You learn to look at it as a tool of appreciation. Like, okay, it's not my brain trying to sabotage me. It's my brain saying, hey, we've seen situations like this where it didn't go well. Let's just look for the signs of that. And then if not, let's go.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Page of Swords and 4 of Pentacles are both very like protect, defense energies, right? And the 5 of Cups is like your grief. How do you ride the waves when emotions feel to be like a tsunami? Like, talk about the process of not suppressing it, but not drowning in it.
I would say in recent years, I've learned how to not do that. But I think to answer this question, I have to go back to when I was not ideal at it. I used to fall into these habits of like impulsive behavior and just kind of like spiraling and like letting myself sort of spin out, I guess. And I recognized then that I think I just needed that release. And it wasn't exactly just the moment itself that I was spiraling about. It was probably years of stress kind of coming to the surface. And the longer that I avoided acknowledging the stress that was bottling up, the more that I was likely to keep that pattern going. And now I have more, I almost want to say like appreciation. I keep saying appreciation, but like that's really what it is. Appreciation for like when emotions come up, I can get it sorted and filed away almost. Like it's not going to be held in my nervous system for a long period of time. And I would even go as far as to say that like at one point, you know, when I was spiraling out of control, I would say that like I used that as an opportunity to just like make poor decisions, right? And at the time that was, you know, that was drinking or that was dyeing my hair, doing something stupid, right? Like
Right.
something that I would regret. And now I just feel like I don't have those like impulses the same way because I've done a lot to manage my own energies when they come up, pushing them down.
Talk about the difference it has made. The difference it has made to not judge yourself for feeling things.
I think of an example like I've not always been the most like organized person. That was like a big obstacle for me. And I think that that went along with like my self-sabotage. Getting organized, I had to be patient with myself and not get upset at the fact that I let messes pile up or, things get out of control. I just had to be patient with myself though, like, and just be like, it is what it is. There's no sense in being mad at myself for the mess that I created. It's just a matter of how I clean it up.
I feel like that is symbolic in other ways, like other messes, right? Because we make these situations in our life where it's bringing me to the quote, the longer you stay on the wrong train, the more expensive it is to get home.
Oh my gosh. I think I heard you say that not too long ago and it like actually stuck with me. I think I like thought about that this morning actually. Oh my goodness. I guess I'm putting my business out here. At one point I had like credit card debt and I watched it just pile up and pile up. And, I feel like that's a very literal example of that. But realistically, like it came from a place of like just wanting to feel better. And then like once the bill came around, right? Like I was spending it on things that I just wanted or needed in the moment, right? Once that bill came around, it was like even a bigger charge. Whereas like I think if I would have like self-regulated, I wouldn't have needed to do the impulsive spending or whatnot.
When a problem gets so big, you're like, okay, well, it's not going to make a difference, this little choice that I'm making. And you don't realize how much that's actually adding up over time. So we're down to the final round here. Tell us, if you were handing the mic right now to your higher self and your higher self was looking at your life so far and your higher self was like, this is the most important thing that I can say to the crowd watching based off of the experience that you have had, what would your higher self talk about or say or give advice wise in that case?
I don't know why, but the first thing that comes to mind, or I guess that I'm hearing, is like know when enough is enough. I guess that's like to know your boundaries and know when you need to like take care of yourself, not to surpass that threshold. I think the reality is like we like to say that we don't know when our own threshold is, but there's always like these signs and we've always seen them, and it's more of like a practice of acknowledging them even when they're quiet. It's weird that my higher self is putting it through that way, I guess.
Imagine this is me giving this card to your higher self now and your higher self responding.
Avoidance gets you nowhere.
Higher self is spicy. I like it.
Sometimes you just have to be direct with people. There's not a nice way to be, there's not a nice way to deliver things when the truth is more important.
He stood up. Did you see that? He's like, the wound of the kindness curse. It's so interesting because a little bit ago I was going to ask you around about the red string of fate, and it ended up going in a different direction, and now it's showing up. So I want to also talk about that in a second. Taught that love must be earned with pain. This wound arises when care, affection, or approval came with strings attached. You learned that to be loved, you had to sacrifice, suffer, or shapeshift. It can leave you overgiving, afraid of ease, and tangled in the belief that love must always cost you something. Talk about how, with the red string of fate, right? It's like what is meant for us will align with us. Talk about how you don't have to water yourself down for that to be the case. Like you don't have to perform in order to receive. You just have to be authentically yourself.
I almost like the red string kind of literally. The more threads you have to your own heart, like the thicker that string is going to be. So therefore it can't be like broken or like snapped, right? And how it's like the thicker that red string is, ultimately the more connected you are to everything around you, right? The more authentic you are, the more you're connected. That is weird how that came back around. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was a couple questions ago, and we ended up going in a different direction. And I was like, "Oh, I hope we get back there." And that's the way it's going.
It's so funny. This is so cool. This is such a cool experience.
Thank you so much. This is going to be very helpful for people. I feel like there's a lot of relatability. You discuss things in a very practical, grounded way that isn't like over there. It's like right here. Like, oh, I can do this. Any final words?
Not really. Just thank you so much for having me. This was such a cool experience. I think I expressed to you that I was nervous the night before, but I'm so glad that I like followed through. I feel like just that was like a testament to my own speaking, you know, that I like had to stand on business, I guess.
Right.
Situation.
Just like he did. You literally stood on business.
Yeah, gotta do it anyways. So
Yeah.
thank you so much though for
Thank you. You did amazing. I'm so proud of you. Okay, so Sarah did not hear the outro, just as no one hears the outro. She didn't come here to provoke. She came to clarify. And today she did, without spectacle, without urgency, with the kind of restraint that only comes from someone who no longer needs to be right, just rooted. Sarah didn't flood the room with revelations. She made space, clean space, the kind that sharpens your perception and reminds your system what coherence feels like. Because clarity isn't noise reduction, it's pattern recognition. And Sarah sees the pattern beneath the pattern, not just where it hurts, but where it loops, where it leaks, where it pretends to be healed before it's actually integrated. Her gift isn't her voice, it's her signal. She doesn't teach through declaration. She teaches through energy hygiene, through presence that regulates, through boundaries that hum instead of shout. She doesn't perform transformation. She embodies energetic discernment. The rare ability to know what's hers, what's yours, and what doesn't belong in the field at all. Sarah is the reason that people don't need to be loud, because frequency speaks louder than volume, because regulation is resonance. And because when you trust your own alignment, you stop trying to manage everyone else's. This is the reckoning of the quiet return. Not quiet as in small, quiet as in sovereign, quiet as in precise, quiet as in nothing to prove and everything to anchor. She didn't come here to be liked. She came here to be clear. And clarity, real clarity, doesn't shout, it holds. So if something felt stiller in you today, don't call it nothing. That was your energy remembering what truth feels like when it's not rushed, not sold, not diluted to be digestible. Let that stillness stay. Let it refine your yes. Let it silence your impulse to explain what already feels true, because this isn't inspiration, it's integration. A shift so clean it leaves no residue, only room. And now you have it. Thank you again so much, Sarah, for being here today. We truly appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for watching. As you know, there is the Humans for Humanity community page where there is wisdom from the episodes. There is a 10 and 20 card tarot spread. There is a playlist from the guest and much more. Sarah's will be up in about a week. Still working on Jen's. Give me a few more days on that. There is also, that is a free resource. Again, it's in my STAN.STORE/The Reckoning Co. And there is also the Humans for Humanity application. I do have the whole first season set, with myself being the 12th episode, the final episode of the first season. After that, I will be beginning to go through those applications. So please take your time with them. If you are filling it out, it's a little bit longer, and you can type it, voice record it, or video record it. Now, next week, you are all going to meet my hairdresser. My good friend Jen is going to be coming on the podcast. And the week after that, we have another double with my friend Michaela. And we also have Brock, which a lot of you may know from TikTok. I think that is all. Thank you again so much for everyone watching. Thank you to Sarah. And thank you for watching. This was another episode of Humans for Humanity. We'll see you soon.